Hey everyone, how's it going? So for this video, I'm going to be covering our phase 2 for this little tutorial guide plan that I had put together earlier. And in this situation, we're going to be dual booting Windows 7 to run alongside of our existing Linux installation. Now, I had mentioned earlier that when we install Windows as a secondary operating system, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes because Windows is going to end up overwriting our GRUB bootloader, and it's going to remove our direct access to our existing Linux installation. So we'll have to fix that in order to be able to actually access Linux again. So just to recap, in our phase 1 in the previous video, we installed a single operating system, in this case Ubuntu Server Edition, to a brand new empty hard drive. So we currently have Ubuntu Server 64-bit installed, and now we want to move to adding or installing Windows 7. In this case, I'm going to be doing Ultimate 64-bit in a dual boot configuration. So the first thing we're going to do is try to install Windows, and you're going to see that this is going to fail due to a partition or a formatting issue. There's essentially no place to install Windows, and the only way to really do that by default is to actually erase our existing Ubuntu server, which we don't want to do. So then we're going to move from there to using an Ubuntu Linux Live CD, or USB if you want, to resize the partitions and to make space for Windows. And we're going to do that using a graphical utility called GParted. That's already built in, so once you load up Linux off of the Live CD, we'll be able to access that. Then from there we're going to move back to installing Windows, and this time you'll see that it'll actually work in the newly freed up partition that we make. Then in phase 4, we're going to find ourselves unable to actually boot into Ubuntu Server, so now we'll only be able to boot into Windows. So to fix that, we're going to have to use another Ubuntu Live CD to fix or reinstall GRUB, and this is actually going to cause another error for us, and that has to do with the difference between 64 and 32-bit packages. So from that, we're going to be directed to a website to download Ubuntu Linux Secure live version, and that website is listed here. Now, you can actually just skip ahead and save yourself some time by going to this website and downloading this now, and I'll show you that in 1 minute. But for the actual video for this tutorial, I'm going to walk through all of these steps just to cover all of the bases. So we're going to go to this website, select the 64-bit edition, download it, and create another USB or DVD bootable installation. So when I actually show this, we're going to be doing this inside of Ubuntu Live, and we're going to create a startup disk using Startup Disk Creator, which is similar to what we did in Windows using the unetbootin utility. Then we're going to restart and boot using the new live version that we're going to create here. And we're going to use another utility called boot repair to fix our GRUB installation. And then finally, just to check that everything worked out, we're going to reboot and make sure that we get our GRUB selection menu and make sure that it works so that we can boot into Linux at first, and then check that Windows actually boots as well. So before we begin, let's exit out of here. If you open up your browser, we want a few things. The first thing you're going to want to do, I guess I should point this out first. That secondary live CD that we're going to be directed to is located at this website, sourceforge.net/p/linux-secure/wiki/home with a capital H. Now this is where they direct us, and from here you actually have to click on Files, and then in this case we want the 64-bit ISO. So you'll click that and download it, and you can just directly go to this website and do this now to save yourself some time. Once that downloads, if you're inside Windows at this point, you can just use your unetbootin utility and create another bootable USB thumb drive, or you can use dburner and create a bootable DVD or CD from this. So if you go ahead and do that, it'll save you some time later on. Otherwise, we're also going to want a Ubuntu desktop live CD. To do that, if you go to www.ubuntu.com/download, and we're going to be using this later on, so it doesn't hurt to download it now. If you go to the Ubuntu desktop, follow that link, and we'll use the long-term support version. So here, even though it recommends 32-bit, I'm going to go ahead and select 64-bit and say let's get it. And just point this out, when you get here, it's asking for a donation. Feel free to, by all means, contribute if you want, but you don't have to. But to actually be able to download it, you need to move all of these over to 0. So we do that, and then we can click the download link, and you can see it's starting to download there. So I'm just going to cancel this because I already have it. And what you would do then is, again, use the UNetbootin or the deep burner to create a bootable USB or CD or DVD. Now from there, what we want to do, and this is where we had left off last time, we had our Linux Ubuntu Server installation running. And what we want to do, let me just shrink this down. And I'll show you these commands as we go. This isn't going to interfere with anything. So, in order to shut down from the Ubuntu server, you can type out these commands here, which I'm highlighting. Either sudo shutdown-h space now, and what that's saying is shutdown, and the -h means halt, so that's just going to stop it or turn it off right then and there. Or we can use the -r switch, which just says to restart it. In either situation, once we've done that, we want to install the live CD or the USB that we had just created before. I'm sorry, no you don't. What you want to do is insert your Windows, either bootable USB or your Windows installation CD. And the first thing we're going to do is just show that we can't in fact install Windows. You can take my word for it, but I just want to demonstrate what will happen if you try to do it by default. So I'll get this out of the way for now. Skip ahead a little bit here. So Windows is going to install this, and then you'll get to a menu. Just backtrack. So you accept their license terms and then click next, and we want to select custom. And now we have these two partitions listed for our disk. But if we go over, we can realize that there's no way to actually click next. And if we get that little warning, it says that you need a format using NTFS, and since Linux doesn't use NTFS, there's actually no space for us to put it. So the only thing that we can do is actually delete and reformat that. But if we back out, because obviously we don't want to delete our server version. And now at this point, we're going to insert our Linux Live CD or USB drive. So if you select your boot options, and for me that's using F11, we should select to be able to run, and now I'm using the USB drive. So now we want to try Ubuntu without installing. So this should only take maybe a minute or two to boot up. Okay, so this is a live installation of Ubuntu Desktop 12.04. This is what they call the Unity interface. So what we're going to do is click on this icon up here, and we want to start by typing in GParted. So once you type in G, it's going to find the utility we want. We click on it, and you can see all of these partitions that are listed. Now, this is the biggest one, so obviously this is what we want. This has the most unused space. So we're going to select that, and we can see if we go up here that there's this other drive. This is our USB drive, at least that I'm running the live install off of. So just make sure you have the right one selected. You're going to right click on that and then select resize. And then you can just simply drag this to wherever you want. And if you want a more precise number, you can actually click on it and fill in the values yourself. So we're just going to split this right in half. It's a 300 gig hard drive. We're just going to split it right down the middle. So we'll do 150 and approximately 150. So we click resize. Now nothing has actually been set in stone yet. In order to do this, we're going to click this green check and apply these operations. And at that point, this is going to be our Ubuntu server, and then this will be a bunch of free space that we just cleared up. So once we finish, eventually we're going to install Windows into this portion right here. So this should just take a few minutes. Okay, now at this point we're done, and we can go up to the top, and you just want to shut down. So now we want to restart our computer, and if you have to put in your Windows installation CD again, do that now. And I'm just going to force it to boot from the CD-ROM drive. When this pops up, hit any key, and now we'll retry our Windows installation. Okay, we want to select English. Accept the license. Select the custom option, and now you can see here that we have this new unallocated space. It's about 143 gigabytes. So we're going to select that now, and you can see here that it's no longer faded out. We actually have the option to move forward and select next when we select that. So you can select that and go to the additional options, and we'll just create a new formatted partition. Inside there, it's going to format that using the NTFS format, which is what Windows requires. And this is something that Windows does, at least for Windows 7. So now we can move forward. We're going to select next, and Windows is going to install itself. This will take a little while, so I'm just going to skip ahead here. It should restart at least 2 times. It might have to restart 3 times in the process. So once it does that, it's going to ask you again to strike any key. Don't touch anything, just let it boot normally. And it'll pick up here with the installation. Try not to miss anything. Okay, it's going to restart a second time now. Again, we don't touch anything, just let it boot up normally. And I believe this time it should boot into the first time setup. Yep, so it's going to configure the system. It's going to ask you to put in your name, a name for the computer. I'm just going to name it whatever in my case. You can change this later on, so don't worry about it too much. And then same thing as we did before, just type out your password. It requires you to put some kind of a hint in. I'm just going to kind of throw anything in there to get around it, and again, you can write this down in your notebook if you're keeping track of all of your passwords. And again, just make sure that you keep that secure so that other people don't copy your passwords down. Now, I'm not going to put in a product key. If you have one, you can do that at this point right here. And we're going to allow automatically activation of Windows when you sign online, which is fine. Now here we're gonna, in this case, allow Windows to automatically update itself. So select whatever time zone you have. I select Eastern time for myself. Adjust the clock to whatever time it is. And there you have it. Now, I'm assuming that you should have all of the disks that came with your computer when you built it. And if you don't, if your computer is from a specific manufacturer such as Dell, you can go on a separate computer and put in the model and download all of the drivers for your system. And that'll give you access to the all the features that come with it. So you'll be able to access the network, which is important, and you won't actually be able to download any of that to it until you do that. So the first thing you want to do is download those drivers, put them on a CD or a blank USB drive, and just transfer those over to it. And once you install at least the network drivers, you should then be able to access the internet and download whatever other drivers you need and update the system accordingly. So that's why you have this little X down here, because the drivers for the actual network card aren't installed at this point. Now I'm going to go ahead and shut down, actually restart in this case, just to make sure that everything worked out well. And what we're going to find is that we can boot the computer, but it never asks us for an option to start Linux at any point. It'll just keep trying to boot into Windows. So now, in order to actually fix that, we're going to need to load our live CD again. So let me just pause this. Once we boot up our live CD, we're going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm demonstrating here is that you can open up the system and you can actually look inside. Here is our Ubuntu Server file system, and then if we click on this partition, we can actually peer inside of our Windows files, and we're doing all of this from our USB live CD at this point. So as you can tell, if I had gotten physical access to your computer and I didn't know your Windows password, all I have to do is load up a Linux live CD and I can view all of your files anyway. So what we want to do is go back up here, type in TER, that should find the terminal, and we want to put in a series of commands. Now as I said, this is going to end up failing in our case, but I just want to show you the process so you can see exactly what happens. So we're going to end up typing in these commands right here. Okay. You're going to type in sudo add apt-repository space ppa : YANN Ubuntu /boot -repair $& and then sudo apt-get update. When you type all of that out, you're going to hit enter. And now if you had installed a copy of Ubuntu Server 32-bit, the process we're doing right here should work out for you. So this comes up, press enter. It's going to download all of these packages. Now to do this, you actually need the computer hooked up to the network, so make sure that you have an Ethernet cable plugged in or some wireless card configured to your wireless network. So now once that does its thing, we want to type out sudo apt-get install -y boot -repair and then our $& again, and then in parentheses we're just going to put sudo boot -repair with an ampersand sign. And what that's going to do is after it runs this, it's going to actually open up the utility for us. Okay, once it opens up to this splash screen, we're going to choose the recommended repair option. I didn't realize it went that quickly. And here you go, we get this little error that says 64 bits detected. So we need to use a special version, and it directs us to a website. So now, at the beginning of this tutorial, I had directed you to save yourself some time and go directly to that site and download and create a live CD at that point using it. So if in this entire tutorial you had been using this all along, you shouldn't have a problem. But let's say that you followed this exactly and now you got to this point. What you can do is go right to that website using Firefox inside of the live install. Now let me skip ahead a little bit. So we select that, damn it, files link right there. And we want the 64-bit ISO. So we're going to download that. And that takes a few minutes to download. Once that finishes, what we're going to need to do, since we're running this, in my case, off of a USB thumb drive already, we need to use another USB thumb drive. So you need one at least, I believe, about 2 gigabytes. I know a 1 gigabyte one was too small for it, so you probably need at least a 2 gig or larger thumb drive. If you don't have one, you can go on your Windows computer to this site and then just use the existing one that you had before, or you can load this to a blank CD or DVD as well. So we'll jump ahead now. This is going to download. And once it finishes, we can go ahead and put our other USB thumb drive in. We want to go up to the top here and start typing out the word start, and we'll see that startup disk creator. So we select that. It's going a little fast. So from here we're going to be doing essentially the same thing we did in UNet bootin'. We want to select an ISO image file. This is going to be the one that we just downloaded, and then we want to select which USB drive we want to install this to. So we'll go to our downloads folder. We want to select that secure download that we just downloaded, and then select our new USB thumb drive. Now you can't do this to the one that you might be already running this on, because that wouldn't make sense. This needs to be running on that existing USB thumb drive. So we select a different one. I think that's the problem that I had here. Yep, so it's going to start copying all those files onto it, and this takes a long time. So once it finishes, you select OK, you go up to the top right corner, and we're going to restart the system again. So now finally, we restart the system. We're going to force it to boot from our newest created USB thumb drive. So we go to our boot menu. I think it didn't recognize my drive yet, so I had to reboot. Okay, so once we select that, it's going to load off of that new live install. And this one took a little bit longer. I don't know if it's my thumb drive or what. Man, this was slow. Okay, we want to select the try Ubuntu option. We don't want to install. So this is going to be slow again. And now this looks essentially the same, but it has a few different options available to us. So what we want to do is go back up here, select this Ubuntu logo, this symbol here. And we're going to start typing boot and just wait for it to search. This is one of the reasons that I don't really like the new Ubuntu desktop editions and the Unity interface, because it's a little bit slow and they show advertisements right in it for you. So stupid thing. Now these are all actually advertisement links, but this is the option that we want. So we want this boot repair utility. So you click on it once. And now again, we want to try it using the recommended repair options. And this time it's running without giving us that error. So now it's going to reinstall the GRUB files that it needs to and reconfigure it. And hopefully once this finishes, you'll be able to select between Linux and Windows. So we'll let it run its course. And it should just do everything okay, and then it'll say everything worked out alright. So we select OK. Now we can go ahead to the top right corner and shut down once again. Remove the thumb drive or the disk from the tray once you're finished with this, as soon as this shuts down completely. And at this point we don't want to touch anything. We want to let it boot up normally. And hopefully, if everything worked out alright, you should get to this GRUB options menu. And here you can use the arrow keys to move up and down. Let me just go over those options really quickly. So we have two entries here for Ubuntu, and you don't need to really worry about the recovery mode at this point. So if you wanted to load up your Ubuntu server, you would select this first option. These memory tests are for certain diagnostic things. We don't need to be concerned with those either. And then we have two options for Windows. I believe this one is going to be for the recovery partition. And it'll still give us access to boot normally, but this is the one you're going to want to use by default, the second one. So you either want the top one or the very bottom one. And we'll test them both just to make sure that they both work. So we'll start by select either one you want. In this case, here we have the recovery one, so we can start Windows normally or we can boot into the Windows recovery. So if you go down to the start Windows normally, everything should work out alright. Okay, it's going to ask for your password. And now we're back into Windows. So we're going to go ahead and start and shut down and just restart the computer again. We should get the GRUB menu once again, and this time we're going to select our Linux install. Just kidding. I selected Windows on that one, and then I actually forced a restart. So in this case, we're going to select our Ubuntu, and it should load up to your login prompt for Ubuntu Server. So in that case, now you have a dual booted system and you can load and switch between Ubuntu Server or Windows 7. So now in the next tutorial, I'm going to pick up from here and we're going to triple boot. We're going to add, I believe I'm going to use Linux Mint and add that to the mix. So now we'll end up with a server edition of Ubuntu, a Windows 7, and a graphical desktop version of Linux, in this case Mint.